Hi everyone, welcome to this Future of Contraception event. I'm very pleased to be with all of you today and to be also with Ljudmila Katchan, Daniela Hassoun and Daniela Schardinger. Hello ladies.
Hi. Hello.
Hi, hello. So everyone, you can introduce yourself in the chat if you want, so we can know who is in the room. So this event is organized by SISTA. We're a French non-profit. Our goal is to, oh, I can hear myself. No, it's okay. Our goal is to bridge the funding gap for female-funded companies. We have different teams. We have one dedicated to investors, one to entrepreneurs, and our own team dedicated to femtech. What we want to do is to create the first femtech community in Europe. And to do so, we've started it by creating a LinkedIn group. So if you're a femtech entrepreneur, if you're an investor or medical professional, or just a femtech enthusiast, you can have a look at the group. CJ is going to share the link on the chat. And if you want to join, we're super happy to have you. Now, before we start, I'd like to say a few words on femtech to set the stage and to make sure we all know what we're talking about today. So first, maybe a quick definition by Ida Tin, who's the founder of Clue and who's coined the term femtech. She says, femtech refers to software, diagnostics, product and services that use technology to support women's health. Now, we have seen 3 waves of femtech. First, the first one covers menstruation, reproductive and pregnancy. The second one, menopause, pelvic wellness. And the third one, urogenital wellness and sexual wellness. Now, a few numbers. So 90% of women are primary decision makers for their family. So we see that women have a huge influence in healthcare. Trouble is that no one is serving them. The femtech industry, accounts for only 1.4% of healthcare capital and only 4% of healthcare research funding. Now, the good news is that VC funding to femtech startups has grown by nearly 10 times since 2012. And Frost & Sullivan estimate that the sector has a market potential of $50 billion by 2025. And this was in 2018, this report. So before COVID and before the rise of telehealth. So it's likely to be more than that, actually. And finally, women are 75% more likely to use digital tools for healthcare than men. So we can see that there's a massive opportunity to use tech to serve women's health. Now, back to our topic of the day, contraception. 61 years ago, there were a big revolution with the FDA approving the contraception pill. So this was huge, but since then, what happened? There hasn't been so much innovation in the reproductive space, and this is why we're all here today. So let's start. We can start maybe with a round of presentation. Who wants to start? Ljudmila?
Sure. Hi, my name is Ljudmila Katchan. I am head of research at Cirqle Biomedical. We are a Copenhagen-based startup, and we are developing a new non-hormonal contraception that will be used by women on demand. The product will work by enforcing the natural mucus in the cervix and preventing the sperm cells from accessing the point of fertilization. And we are right now in a preclinical stage, validating our product.
Cool, thank you. Daniela, do you want to go?
Yes, sure. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I'm VP Medical Affairs for a company called Ocon Healthcare, and we're 85% women. And our daily work is researching the female anatomy, the uterus, and we're all very passionate about women's health. We're currently researching several conditions, disorders women have to suffer from, like heavy menstrual bleeding, endometriosis, myomas, uterine cancers. There's a lot of work to be done. And our first product that we've introduced to the market and that is already used by 100,000 women around the world is a non-hormonal contraception. And it's actually a very small ball. So you can see it here. It adjusts to the uterine cavity. So it's really shaped for women. It carries small copper pearls on it. And it prevents pregnancy without using hormones. And it's safer and smaller, more flexible than the current IUDs that are available today. We are doing a lot of more research to come based on this platform technology to really improve women's quality of life.
Great, thank you. Danielle?
So, good evening, everybody. My name is Danielle Hassoun. I am an obstetrician and gynecologist based in Paris, France. I have been for a long time as the head of a family planning center in a public hospital near Paris. I also have been quite involved with the French National Research Institute in research on practice and access to contraception and abortion in France. And also, I have been involved with international NGO to promote, develop reproductive health training program for health professionals, focus on new technologies like medical abortion, for example, which was in the beginning of 2000, a real new procedure.
Perfect. Thank you. So we can start maybe by talking about the different types of contraception that are on the market today. Danielle, do you want to give us an overview of what we have today?
Well, I will try to do a very short review, because in a certain way there are a lot of contraception, and in another way not so diverse. So of course you have all the hormonal contraception, which is probably the more used. No, it's not the more used in the world. It's the more used in France, but not in the world. So all the hormonal contraception, which means pills, stamps, anneaux, and implants. So that's hormonal contraception. And then you have the other medical contraception, I will say, which is IUD. So we have quite a lot of different IUD now, with hormone and without hormone. And then after we are what we could say the old contraception or the natural contraception, which is still used quite a lot.
It's coming back.
Yeah, and of course something that is very much used in the world, not so much in France, which is the definitive contraception, the sterilization for men and women, which is also a contraception, even if it is definitive, it's a contraception. So that's the landscape of the contraception.
Ljudmila, Daniela, anything to add on this one?
I think what's interesting is that most contraceptives available today are actually for women. There is very little options available for men. And in general, we have to, because we are in the space of long-acting reversible contraceptives, so there's a difference between the desire to have a short-term contraceptive method, a barrier method, or to have really a long-term method that you don't have to think about and that is still reversible if you would like to have children in the future, and that doesn't influence the fertility once you decide to stop using it. And I think contraception is really an art, and I do not admire also the healthcare professionals that have to, do all the work in educating women, making sure the women's choice is considered, but also the medical conditions or risk factors are taken into account. There's a lot to be considered when we talk and deal with contraceptives. But the good thing is there is more modern contraceptives coming today, newer methods, and I think there is also a trend towards non-hormonal or low-dose contraceptive methods that we see.
Yes, and actually on non-hormonal contraception, I think there are still a lot of myths or fake news around that. Like, for example, that IUD is only for women that had children. I think it's important maybe to take a moment to discuss this. Ljudmila, do you want to start?
Oh, I am not an expert on the IUDs. Perhaps Daniela can share her insights.
Not only IUDs, but like non-hormonal contraception and the myths that are around it.
The non-hormonal contraceptions, yes, sort of picking up from where we left off, right? A lot of the non-hormonal options that women have not really been mentioned, but I think many of the options and alternatives that we have to hormonal contraception or sort of long-term contraceptives, they do lack in efficacy and they lack in their appearance, I would say, right? In how acceptable they are to use by women. So not even to mention the side effects. And for non-hormonal contraception, some of the myths also include STIs, for example, right? How the non-hormonal contraceptives also work for STIs. Many do, unfortunately, many do not. So that's an important thing to consider as well.
That's a very important point because I think it all comes back to education. And I think there's still a lot of work to be done when educating women, but also healthcare professionals on some of the risks involved with various contraception and some of the myths, like you mentioned, Delphine. You mentioned STIs, Ljudmila. Also, we hear a lot of the times how IUDs, for example, cause infections or, pelvic PIDs, pelvic inflammatory disease, which has already been proven by a lot of studies that that's not the case. And same goes for infertility, women that are afraid that they might become infertile when using an IUD, for example. Again, the WHO and a lot of organizations have done a lot of research on these topics, and it's definitely not true. And a lot of the organizations are recommending IUDs, especially as a first choice, also for young women who might not have given birth before, but are looking for a long-term safe contraceptive method. So there's a lot of educational work still to be done, but the good thing is there's more and more adoption coming towards these methods. And I think as more modern methods and more modern products are brought to the market and safer products, we will definitely see an uptake also on these non-hormonal IUDs that haven't been promoted much by anybody. So that's also one of the reasons there's such a lack of education within this area.
I just will add a few things about education. I think there's education, but there's also information to give to women, because the best contraception, and we know that in practice, is the contraceptions that women has chosen, not the contraceptions that doctors or any practitioners have prescribed. It doesn't work like that. It's really woman who has to choose, and the provider, well, can say this is not okay for you because there is a contradiction. But most of the time, women has to choose. So education and information for women, but also for practitioners, providers, because you say about IUD, it has been a lot of years that we know that IUD doesn't give infection, and a lot of doctors still say that it gives infection. So a lot, and we have a lot of recommendation, international recommendation, national recommendation, WHO recommendation saying that, but it doesn't mean it's not because we have recommendations that recommendation as follow by the practitioner. But I will really want to insist on the fact that women has to choose, because if not, it will not work. And also something which seems to me in my practice very important, there is not one contraception. There is one contraception at one time and another contraception and another time of the life. And women can change. And something that providers do not like most of the time is to see the change. I mean, it's so we have to know that it's like that. A contraception is not for all life. One contraception at one time and another contraception at another time of a woman's life or a couple life.
I think that's super interesting. And how do you think we can make the practitioners follow those recommendations? Is it because they are not aware of it, or they are, but they don't want to follow it? What do you think?
Contraception, consultation take a lot of time to give the information, to discuss, to see what is good, what is not good. So, and that's one of the questions. The other question is the fact that provider, well, sometimes they do not know the recommendation, but it's not so much that they do not know the recommendation. They have a lot of, not only fake news, I will say préjugés. How do you translate that, Delphine? Préjugés.
Good question.
Prejudice.
Prejudice, yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. And because there are people like everybody, they have a lot of
preconceptions. Yes, preconceptions.
Yeah, misconception, but more than misconception. So, and that's more difficult to change. How to be really open-minded.
I think on top of that, it's also sometimes a matter of miscommunication. You have on the one hand all the medical terms, all the medical dispositions or history doctors or healthcare professionals have to consider. And on the other hand, you have women talking about lifestyle, sex, their jobs. It needs to integrate into their life and into what they want.
Yes.
So there needs to be even a translation happening between what women want and desire and talk about, and what healthcare professionals, on the other hand, have concerns about, which is also natural. They also want what's best for the women. Sometimes it doesn't match as well. And that's where I think a lot of the work has to be done to help everyone, to help women, but also healthcare professionals to come to a good solution. And I think the WHO has done a nice job. They've developed an app which can be downloaded by anybody who wishes to, and you can insert parameters like your age, your weight, if you're smoking, high blood pressure, migraines, anything that might actually be a risk factor for a certain contraceptive. But the these women might not necessarily know what options there are. So the app actually takes everything into account, the medical conditions, but also the women's desires and choices and prevalences, and then spits out a first choice recommendation, a second choice recommendation. And I think that's a good starting point also to start a discussion about contraception, which I find useful.
Yeah. There is also an interesting trend on how women choose their contraceptives for now, right? So apart from the healthcare practitioners, which still play a huge role in helping drive the decisions of how you protect yourselves, there is also some movement towards the telehealth, right? The femtech, all the apps like you were mentioning, the social media, for example. So you get a lot more information regarding the options and the alternatives that are available to you. There is, for example, also the platform called The Lowdown, that essentially, right, apart from not maybe taking into consideration the risk factors, but essentially presenting you with the options that are available, and also providing you with reviews, actual reviews of the contraceptives that have been used by user, which gives you some better understanding of what are the different options and how would they affect your health, for example, right? How effective are they? So I think the trends are also going towards that.
Definitely, yes. There's a question that I think we can take now because it's about what we're talking about, the different type of contraceptive that are on the market today. It's the question from Deborah. Deborah says, I feel like copper IUD is considered a more natural contraception, but how is copper more natural than hormones? I mean, we do already have hormones in our body, no copper. Maybe this one is for you, Daniela.
Yes, sure. It's always, we've heard some of the questions like this before. So the copper that is used in copper IUDs, it's a very, very small dose that is released daily. And it's actually less copper than we consume with our food daily. So it is natural in that sense that the food we eat contains copper, and it does not interfere within our system. So it's local, and it doesn't work systemically like hormones do. So hormones, they actually communicate with the brain, they go through our system, and copper is a local, natural ingredient, let's say, in food, but also in a birth control that kills the sperm. So sperm doesn't like it, and it makes it immortile.
One of the questions is, what is natural and what is not natural? I will say, I mean, that natural is not good always also. And we cannot say that natural is always good. An IUD is a device put into the body, so we can say that it's not natural. I mean, I insert a lot of IUDs for long years now, but the problem is, I will say, it's not natural, but it doesn't mean that it's not good. So most of the women are happy with IUD, copper or hormonal, depending what she wants. And I'm not sure that the fact that it's not natural, I know that for women it's very important, but I don't think that not to be natural is always bad for the health. So it's another way to think about that.
Yeah, that's interesting and important, precise. On another topic, let's talk about male contraception. Is it the next innovation coming up? And where are we on male contraception? Danielle, maybe do you want to go on this one?
I can start, you know. just one thing more general. I think we are ready now to have male contraception, which was not the case when I was a young doctor, long time ago. So where women clearly do not want that male have the contraception and have the power of this contraception, because it's a power in a certain way. It's a control anyway. So I think now, because there is something in the relationship between men and women which are changing. I mean, it's not finished. We still have, it's not yet finished, but there are a lot of changes between men and women. I feel that now we are people, men and women, are ready for for male contraception. The problem is that we are very late on this research. In France, we have two-way, a hormonal one, which works, but it's not perfect, and a mechanical one, which is, I don't know in English, the slip chauffant. I mean, the underwear, heating underwear. Okay? So, but it's, I will say, almost anecdotic for the moment. So there are a lot of research, but it's not yet ready to be used.
I think there is, there's a difference between the women's cycle and the man's cycle. Women's cycle is very complicated. We have obstetricians.
I think there's an echo. Maybe, Danielle, do you mind to put your microphone? I think it's on your side. Yes.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Now it's better. Thank you. The cycle of man is very flat. So it's much easier to influence the cycle of a woman that's, ups and downs, and you put in a microgram of something and you can totally flatten it and avoid certain, functions that lead to fertilization. With men, also you have to consider libido, because it has always been accepted for women to have libido loss when they take the pill or other hormonal contraceptives. But for men, libido loss means in a lot of cases that they cannot function sexually. So it's considered much more of a bigger deal if men actually suffer from libido loss. So it's really about what side effects can be tolerated by men versus women. And it's also more complicated to develop these contraceptives for men. There is research going on. There is a gel currently in development in India that it is injected into the tubes that carry the sperm. And it's reversible. It's also non-hormonal. And they are actually quite far in the research. So I think that's something that we'll see in the coming years. There is also some plant-based pills that they've been researching in Indonesia that actually has shown quite some effects. And the universities in the US, together with the WHO, are actually researching testosterone shots. And with testosterone shots, it becomes very important to see how that affects the libido, but they actually have seen quite some success. I think now it's really a matter of will those products get approval, and what will be the side effects. And we women have been suffering from the side effects for many years, and we've had to carry that burden.
That's true. I think going back to the acceptability of the male contraceptives, I think there has been a lot of research done in whether men and women would accept the burden of contraception on them. It's quite interesting to read also, because in the final end, the burden of pregnancy and unwanted pregnancy is still on the woman, right? So whether women would be accepting the man to take responsibility, a non-visible, let's say, contraceptive. That's an interesting point. I also think that there is a reason for why the research and the innovation in the field of male contraception is so slow. It's not just a lack of funding, and even if it is a lack of funding, it's driven by the societal, right, sort of standards at this moment. And even though it's changing, I do feel the change is quite slow. So I'm not sure if we are quite ready or there yet for a male contraceptive.
We have a few questions on that. First, maybe Marine. Marine said, I have heard definitive contraception for men is actually not definitive. What's the truth with that? Do you know? Oh, Danielle, you're mute.
Sorry. There are different techniques for the male sterilization. So I think we can have now definitive and non-definitive. It depends on the techniques. Most of the time, the techniques we use is definitive. But that's something quite easy to do, to find new technique, not definitive. But depending on the techniques, both are existing.
I think also it's a matter of reversible versus non-reversible, you know, and
yes, sure.
yeah. So I think most of the methods are reversible for men, but also there is not so much research done on that. So, and there is little methods available anyway. So it's it's really we will see what happens in the future.
There's another question from Clémence. Who are the healthcare practitioners men can consult to get contraception? Is it organized in the current health system, or is it something very new? Danielle, do you know who can men can go to? Oh, you're mute. We can't hear you.
You're on mute, Danielle.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Can you say the question again? I'm not sure to have understood.
Yes. Clémence is asking, who can we consult when we are a man and we want to get contraception?
That I don't know. I don't know, because I'm a gynecologist, and for the moment I don't know almost anything about the two contraception, the male contraception existing in France. There are one consultation in Toulouse and one in Paris for these two methods of male contraception. So very few people are doing that. I don't know for the other countries how it is, but as gynecologists, we are not used to see men usually. But I think if there is a male contraception, if a male contraception is commercialized, probably general practitioner or gynecologist will prescribe and consult for that. But for the moment, it's so many people are doing that difficult to find.
I think this showcases a clear problem, right? That even when we do have access to a male contraceptive, how do the men get access to, even if the research leads that far into the future? I think it's an establishment of a system that has been done for the female contraceptive, right, over 60 years, let's say. That's also lacking and might limit the actual access.
Yes, when male contraception will be really on the market, because it has to be on the market, I think all the landscape probably will change. And I mean, there will be something else, other doctor, other practitioner. I mean, it will depend also a lot about which technique will be used. Is it a medical one? It's a non-medical one. So the provider could be very different. But I think now it's like science fiction. You know what science fiction is?
Sci-fi.
Science fiction.
A little bit.
I think there are sexual health workers and institutions, especially they're called first love clinics in a lot of countries. I think where men and women can go to get consultation on sex and contraception as such, where they hand out free condoms for those starting out. So we see in some countries, we work a lot with those sexual health educators and clinics to give them educational materials because they see couples also often. So I think they will just adapt naturally, and then you will have your urologists probably that have to also be informed about new methods available. And yeah, there's still so much educational work to be done on contraception for women, and then this will just, I think, come as an add-on that we will have to work on.
Thank you. Now, maybe talking about innovation, what do you think? What do you think is the number one need today for patients? Why do we need innovation in contraception? And maybe for you, Ljudmila, what is research looking at today in terms of contraception?
I think the trends, right? If you look at the different surveys asking women about contraception, the trends are quite clear. So we discussed this already before. The trends are moving towards non-hormonal contraceptives, but because the women are getting more awareness, right? I think also it's a lack of alternatives and options is being highlighted more and more. So, for example, I was reading in one of the surveys that I think about 20-25% of women would want an implantable contraception, so something that lasts for a long time and they don't have to think about it ever again, well, until they do have to think about it. And the rest is then faced with the choice of either hormonal, which works well but has its side effects, and non-hormonal, which is limited, as I was mentioning before, in both efficacy, has a lot of side effects. And I think the research is now more and more also focusing on creating new advances, not necessarily improving old products, or at least in my opinion, the innovation should be pushing new advances forward. So things that are not just improving on the existing products, not making a new spermicide, for example, or a better spermicide, but making a product that is different, that is going towards what the user wants and needs, putting the women or the users in the center as such.
I think I totally agree with you, Ljudmila. It's a trend. It's a new generation. Also, I think on top of the non-hormonal trend, we see a trend towards long-acting reversible contraceptives. There is a change in family planning. Women have children later in their lives, so there has been a total shift also of lifestyle. So I think contraception also needs to fit the lifestyle of newer generations, and it needs to be safe. So I think there's always advancements to be made on safety and on side effects. We see that there's still a majority of women who choose not to use a contraceptive because of the fear of side effects. So new innovation is great, but I think there's still a lot of room of improvement of contraceptives that have been around for many years. So, and I think the trends are quite clear in that sense that everything is going towards non-hormonal, low dose. I think women are becoming more aware of what they put inside their body. Research is lacking in terms of female anatomy and how women actually tolerate drugs. Most of the drug trials are done on men in general. So I think now with more money being put in that space in women's health, and there is a focus on this space at the moment, we will see a lot of advances coming that are better shaped for women, better designed for women, and not just women, but also men, if we're talking about male contraceptives. But women have been overseen for many years as it relates to research, and now I think is the time to include us and show that we matter, and also our burdens matter, the side effects we have to tolerate matter. And I'm very happy with the movement that I'm seeing.
Of course, efficacy is one of the main points for contraception, and side effects, not to have side effects also. But I would say something more general about what women are looking also for. I mean, also something which has, except with condom, when you use condom when you have one intercourse, it happens a lot of times that women do not have a lot of intercourse and have to take the contraception all along. And that's why they don't want to take it. So if we have a dream, we can imagine. The emergency contraception does not work as so well, so that's not the solution. But maybe we could imagine or have a dream of a contraception which will be like something you take because you have one intercourse one day, but maybe you will not have during one month, 2 months, 3 months, or 6 months. So that's also why I think hormonal contraception, or even maybe IUD, seems to women a little bit like a burden. They are on contraception, they don't need it all along, but they have to take it. So of course, I mean, I think contraception which are on market are not completely adapted to women's life or to couple life. So I think that could be one of the ideas, more adapted to the real life.
Completely.
And not only focused on efficacy. I agree that efficacy is something important, but maybe not so much focus on efficacy and more focus on adapted to real life of people, not only of women, of people in general.
And Ljudmila, I think this is what you're working on, right?
With on-demand contraceptives, yes, that would put the user requirements and the user needs in the center. Exactly. And there are also trends that you see the research is going in that direction. I think what some of the barriers, right, for research is also that hormonal contraceptives are easy in a sense because we do have a defined cycle, and this is something very obvious to control. And I think there are some technological difficulties to come up with something completely new and novel to bypass the obvious and to just create something new. I think that's quite difficult as well.
Yes. Do you want to say just a few words about we and how it will work?
Yes, of course. So we is going to be a gel. The product will be a gel, and it will be an on-demand, completely 100% reversible contraception that a woman can use at a moment's notice when there is a need for it. And as I was mentioning before, we are working on something called mucus engineering. So we are essentially leveraging an existing barrier in women, a natural barrier that is present in the vagina and in the cervix, and we're simply just creating it, making it stronger. So enforcing this barrier and preventing the sperm cells from accessing the point of fertilization. And yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was about to ask. So it's a vaginal gel that women can apply. And
it's woman control.
How long does it take to be efficient?
It will be efficient within minutes, and it will last for hours.
Okay.
And the vision for the product, right? And that will happen, the secretion of the product will happen naturally. So there is a natural turnover in your vagina. So that's where the whole reversibility comes in. That the product will simply just be secreted from your body naturally without you having to essentially do anything else than apply it yourself when you need it.
Okay, great. Exciting. Maybe another question on this. So when we talk about innovation, do you think we can improve the existing products that we have, or do we need to look at something totally different?
Is this a question for me or in general?
I would say that we really need different. We can improve a little bit hormonal contraception. We can improve, change few things, but the concept is the same. For example, for hormonal contraception, we are using estrogen and progestin. Okay, so we change the drugs. It's not exactly the same, and there are low dose now. But anyway, the concept is the same with hormonal contraception. The concept is to stop the ovulation. Okay, so that's the concept. It's an interesting and very efficient concept, but that's the concept. So I'm dreaming of really something completely different. I know that there are some research in this sense, but I'm not sure that we can improve a lot what we have now. Not sure. I'm not, I mean, what we have is not bad, I will say. Even hormonal contraception is good. It's very efficient. Side effects are not so many. There are not so many side effects, and there are very, very few accidents. And the benefit and the risk is very good for hormonal contraception too. But I don't think that we can improve it really if we use this, if researchers are working on the same concept. There are something completely new and completely innovative, which is really needed, that we need.
Yeah. I think there is research, we're much further in our research now that we've been, 60 years ago when the first pills came or when the first IUDs came to the market. So back then they were using, for example, 2-dimensional ultrasound. Whereas now we have 3-dimensional ultrasound. We know much more about the uterus. We know much more about the anatomies. So I think there is a point to be made on improving, maybe older contraceptives that have been introduced 60 years ago, where the research was limited about the body, about how it's tolerated. And now that we have more research, we can improve those contraceptives more easily and quicker, and can bring more modern contraceptives based on a technology that's been also tested for a long time. Because we also need long-term data. Look how long it took to realize what the side effects of the pills were, or to realize what some of the side effects of IUDs were. It took many, many years. So with any new contraceptive that comes to market, we will only see in tens of years what might be some of the side effects. So there's also something to say to rely on some well-tested technologies and improve them now with the newer research we have available at our hands.
I think we need also to change the way we actually see and direct the innovation, right, and the research that is ongoing, really more towards the actual user and user preferences and what the user wants and needs. I think this has been kind of a central theme in what we've discussed so far. So we have to, the research has to also make it not just effective, right? Let's say probably best to be effective, make it attractive for the user. I think there is a definite need for new concepts and new advances, especially in the field of non-hormonal contraception, because that has been really lagging behind, especially in the sense of targeting the user and creating something that is attractive, let's say for a woman to use, right?
Thank you, Ljudmila. And maybe another topic that we haven't covered, natural contraception. What is your opinion on that? You said, Danielle, that it was coming back, that it used to be old techniques. And oh, you're mute, Danielle.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Voilà. The techniques are old. We are using temperature, cycle, and so on. Of course, now what we have as the new technologies can help in calculating the cycle, the period of the fertile period, and so on. But and I will say that yes, a lot of women now are using that, but I will say that they will anyway. They were using it before, but probably they didn't want to tell us, the doctors, the providers, that they use it, because when they say that, and 20 years ago, for example, we found, I don't know if we judged them, but we found these women a little bit, we found that to use a contraception which is not so efficient, that the pill or the IUD is not reasonable. So I think that probably they use it a little bit more, but not so much. I think they tell now that they use it, and that's good. So our job now is also to explain them how it works, how is the cycle, how is this possible for certain women who are very, very regular cycle, so they can calculate quite well what happened. And for some other women, where it is much more difficult to calculate, because some cycle, which is not a disease, it's just like that. Some women are very irregular cycles, so it makes quite difficult to calculate exactly the fertile period. So I think they always have used it, but now they say they use it, and it's good, and it's really good, really good.
I think just women have to be aware of the efficacy of such methods. So I think they have to be educated well that there might be factors that could influence the results. They might have a fever, or they might get sick. There's so many different factors to be considered when measuring temperature, when using these apps. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad or good contraceptive method. I think it's important that the education is done right on what can be expected, and that also sometimes it could be that they combine contraceptive methods. The woman might be using the app, and the man might be using a condom, or they might be using a diaphragm also. So you can combine certain contraceptive methods to get a higher efficacy. And again, it comes down to the needs of the women. And I loved what you said, Danielle. The best contraceptive method is the one the woman chooses. So if women feel comfortable and do want to use the apps or the wristbands or whatever there is available today, if they're aware of maybe the lower efficacy or the facts that could influence it, then I think it's fine. It comes back to education and expectations.
I think women can accept also low efficacy. It depends what they want. I mean, if a pregnancy is coming, if she is pregnant, maybe she wants this pregnancy. So, okay, it was less efficient. She has a pregnancy, it's okay for her. But for some women also, if she has a pregnancy and if she does an unwanted pregnancy, she can do an abortion, and it's also okay for her too. I mean, women has to know what risk she takes and accept it. And we providers are not here to judge what they are doing. And that's it. So, okay, even if it's less efficient, it can be a good method for some people and for some couple and for some women.
It all comes back to education, as you said, Daniela. And there's one question actually on that from Noemi. How would you recommend to educate more in a more efficient way, both men and women? Is it tools, media, people? What do you think?
I think it's a combination of all. I think it's companies that need to do the education. That's what we feel responsible for doing. It's media, it's social media. Unfortunately, still today, there are limits on social media on what you can talk about. In a lot of European countries, we're not allowed to educate even on copper IUDs because they are inserted by a medical professional. So we can't talk directly to the audience, whereas apps, for example, they can do advertising even on, Instagram or Facebook. I think there has to be a balance of either you can talk about all contraceptives or you can't talk about them. I think this is a challenge we're facing today. And then there's still so much taboo. Even on social media, you get blocked. If you want to talk about contraceptive, it falls under sexual content and you get blocked. So
even for contraceptive?
Yes, we've seen it that sometimes the AI filters actually block it as sexual content.
Okay.
So it's challenges we are facing, and I think now more and more in a lot of countries now they're changing. I think France has now actually allowed companies to talk about IUDs. That's just been recently. So I think that's something very important, that we can do our educational work. We need to be able to talk about it.
And how does it work? Is it like the government? Do you know, like in France?
Yes, it's regulatory. So it comes from the medical authorities. They regulate what you can talk about. So for example, if it's specific medication, if it's considered drugs, it has a different regulation than, for example, medical devices. But then medical devices are even put in classes. So if it's inserted by a healthcare professional, it's considered a drug and you cannot talk about it. Whereas if it's a device women can insert or use themselves,
okay, I see.
You are allowed to advertise it. So I think, and then sometimes what happens is that the less effective contraceptives are allowed to advertise because they are used by women, but the higher effective ones are not allowed to advertise because they need a healthcare professional to be inserted or prescribed. So I think that's something where the regulation needs to catch up and do an even I think regulation, where we can talk about either all types of contraceptives or only specific ones, or none at all.
Ljudmila, Danielle, do you want to add something on education? No.
I think
it's a long story.
Yeah.
Education is a long story. Long and difficult story.
Yeah, I think increasing transparency, just decreasing the taboos, increasing transparency is completely second what Daniela said. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we have covered most of the questions and all the topic that we wanted to discuss today, and it's 7:30, so we're right on time. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you for your participation and all your questions. Thank you to Danielle, Daniela, and Ljudmila. It was great to talk to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank
you.
you, Josephine.
And have a great day, and bye.
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 Bye.